communications link to Dragon systems. They conducted leak checks, which were successful, and communications checks with the core here in Hawthorne, which is the person who will speak to them directly throughout the mission, as well as the launch director in Florida. This is where they are checking their comm path through both ground stations and the tracking and data relay satellites that we'll use to talk to the crew the entire way to the station.
And after all of those suit leak checks were successful, the closeout team was able to get out of the Dragon capsule and seal up that hatch, which also got its own leak check and was confirmed successful. At this point, the closeout team is out of the pad. They're away from the BDA, the blast danger area, and weather operators are about to kick off their final checks on wind speeds at the pad, which are going to be used during the final go, no go for launch. So we're all keeping eyes on the weather right now. Before we get to that final go, no go, all the various teams at both NASA and SpaceX are going to do internal go polls, just making sure conditions are right with Falcon 9, the Dragon, the crew, the range, and the space station before the final go is given. So let's check back in with the man over in Houston, Gary, for a status and the team supporting the space station for their readiness for launch.
Thanks, Dan. The team here in Mission Control Houston remains go for launch. We're also very hopeful about that weather. All systems on board the station that are required to be healthy for this mission are continuing to look good. Chris Cassidy is wrapping up his workday, and we'll be watching Bob and Doug launch here in just under an hour. So station power and communication systems are normal. Computers and networks used for monitoring Dragon's approach have been checked out, and the cabins and the station cabin's atmosphere and pressure are as expected and ready to welcome 2 new crew members aboard. Mission Control will be closely monitoring Bob and Doug's flight and checking off milestones for most of the flight, and this very same team will be coming back tomorrow to be ready when Dragon gets in range of the International Space Station and we begin integrated operations and prepare for Dragon's docking. So I'll send it back. International Space Station team here is ready for launch. Go Falcon 9, go Dragon, and Godspeed to Bob and Doug.
All right, thanks, Gary. If you are just now joining us, you picked a really good time. We're just a little over an hour to launch. And welcome to our coverage for the mission known as Demonstration Mission 2, or Demo 2. Liftoff time still holding for 3:22 p.m. Eastern. Tracking no issues with Falcon 9 or Dragon. Everything good with the range so far. We're just really keeping an eye on that weather. Over the last 3 hours, our crew members, Doug Hurley and Bob Benkin, donned their SpaceX suits in the historic crew quarters suit-up room. After that, they walked out of crew quarters, just as every astronaut to fly from space from this port has done since Apollo 7. And then they were transported over to the pad, where the crew members entered the SpaceX Crew Dragon spacecraft that we're looking in live.
Today is a historic launch. It will be the first time a commercially built spacecraft will launch people into orbit, and the first time the U.S. has sent people to the space station from American soil since 2011 with the retirement of the Space Shuttle program. Over the next hour, we will conduct a series of polls to get ready for launch, have Bob and Doug arm the launch escape system, and begin fueling Falcon 9. Launch is set for 3:22 p.m. Eastern. This will include a 12-minute flight to orbit and then a 19-hour flight to dock with the International Space Station tomorrow morning.
Today's mission is the culmination of years of work between teams at SpaceX and NASA. Demo 2 is going to be an end-to-end flight test starting with this launch today, going on to dock with the space station tomorrow, and then splashing down at the end of their mission. And this is going to be the final test for NASA to certify SpaceX for regular crew flights to the space station.
We've been hearing a little bit from the crew on board Dragon, which you can see on your right screen. They are currently strapped into their seats and already through communications and leak checks. They're able to follow all the milestones still ahead on those display panels just above them, getting insight into all Dragon and Falcon 9 systems as we proceed towards launch. So at T-minus 1 hour and 13 minutes, let's check in with John I for a status update on the vehicles. What's the update, John?
Thanks, Jesse. Well, not much to add to what Dan and Jesse just brought up. We've had a smooth countdown this afternoon. SpaceX team is working no issues as the pace begins to pick up here in the last 70 minutes. On Falcon 9, we did get the team on console. Earlier, you heard the comm checks between the responsible engineers and the crew. The engineers will be making calls on ascent for the crew's benefit, so they want to make sure that they could hear them before we go. The propulsion checkouts of the first and second stages are beginning right now. We're watching them begin to go through the process, opening valves. That check will go for about another 10 minutes, and that'll be our last one until propellant loading. Now the team will assess readiness for launch with a final go, no-go poll at T-minus 45 minutes, and that'll be followed by propellant loading starting at T-minus 35 minutes. Now earlier today, Dragon operators also performed a series of checkouts of Dragon's flight systems. The spacecraft is also currently go for launch. Our NASA crew, astronauts Doug Hurley and Bob Behnken, are currently inside Dragon. The hatch is closed. The SpaceX ground crew has left the tower. The next major event for Dragon is retract of the crew access arm that you can see currently alongside the capsule. That'll happen somewhere between T-minus 45 and T-minus 42 minutes. Now the range is currently clear for launch from historic Pad 39A. The worldwide network of ground stations and the tracking and data relay satellites are ready to support Dragon as it heads into orbit. The weather, that's the one concern. We will get a weather brief at T-minus 1 hour, so just under 12 minutes from now. Currently, the ground and upper altitude winds are go, so that's one thing that we can check as green. At the current time, we did have some rain earlier that appears to have let up, but we are red on conditions for both the electric field at surface levels, lightning, and cumulus clouds. There is an expectation that a forecast that'll be coming up at about T-minus 1 hour also may give us clearance of those conditions. So everything is focusing now on the weather brief at T-minus 1 hours. Also, we should hope to hear about the final check on the ascent corridor. That's the weather along the Atlantic seaboard in case Dragon had to abort on the way to space. The conditions there have been marginal, but the expectation that it would be good for launch. But we will get all of that coming up here very shortly prior to entering propellant load. Now today we are aiming for a launch at 3:22:45 p.m. Eastern Daylight Saving Time, or 19 hours, 22 minutes, 45 seconds Universal Time. Once we begin loading propellant, there's no opportunity to change T0. So once propellant is loading, we're committed, and we'll get one chance at it today. But currently at T-minus 1 hour, 10 minutes, and 30 seconds, everything except the weather is go for launch.
Thanks, John, for that detailed update. We've got an extensive history now of flying Falcon 9 from the Florida coast, and just last year completed a test run of the mission. We're less than an hour from beginning here today.
The purpose of that mission was to demonstrate Dragon's capability to safely and reliably fly to and from the International Space Station. The success of Demo 1 was a really exciting moment,
Falcon
paved
9,
the way
Falcon
for
1
today's
starting.
mission to where we are today. And right now we're getting ready to fly U.S. astronauts from U.S. soil for the first time since 2011.
Dragon and Falcon 9 together have years of operational experience, or what we refer to as flight heritage. As I mentioned earlier, SpaceX has successfully completed 21 flights of Dragon to and from orbit since 2010, including 20 trips to the International Space Station. Not only have we conducted thousands of hours of testing, we've also enhanced and added a number of safety features to Dragon.
Much of what was learned with the Cargo Dragon was leveraged in the design of this new vehicle. It's fully autonomous, which means it can basically fly itself, but also features that full manual override capability just in case of emergency.
And many of the other enhancements help towards SpaceX's goal of reusability and less refurbishment time between missions. So let's take a closer look at these advancements.
Standing at almost 27 feet tall from the very bottom of the trunk to the very top of the nose cone, Crew Dragon's comprised of two main elements. You have the capsule, which is designed to hold crew and pressurized cargo, and then you have the trunk, which holds unpressurized cargo as well as having a solar array and radiator.
And the nose cone at the top of the capsule protects the docking system as well as the guidance navigation control system, or what we call GNC. The nose cone opens for docking and remains attached to the Crew Dragon spacecraft, and that's unlike the previous version of Dragon, and that helps towards our reusability efforts.
completely opposite the nose cone is that trunk. It has attachment points for Falcon 9, the Dragon capsule, and it can hold cargo. On the very outside of the trunk, one half of it contains a radiator that rejects heat from the active thermal control system into space. That's the white part, and that uses SpaceX's new picotiling technology. The other half contains the solar cells used to charge the spacecraft's batteries.
And though we only have 2 astronauts on board today, the spacecraft is actually designed to accommodate up to 7 crew members with modular seats that can be removed and replaced by additional cargo. The seats are made of carbon fiber and are custom sized for any crew member flying on board.
The control panel centered right between the pilot and the commander seats and has those 3 touchscreen displays that gives the crew insight into Dragon and even the ability to operate the vehicle and fly it manually.
And finally, our Super Draco launch escape system is a key safety feature of Crew Dragon, giving the crew the ability to safely escape from the time of launch all the way to orbit.
And as we look to the future beyond this test flight later this year, the first operational crewed mission for NASA will take place. NASA astronauts Mike Hopkins.
Try to review your launch commit criteria and indicate readiness at the appropriate time. Step 5469 for propellant load and launch.
That's a good sign. That was the launch director. We're getting ready to pull the teams as we move towards that go, no go for propellant loading, which happens at about 45 minutes before launch. But back to our Crew 1 mission, NASA astronauts Mike Hopkins, Victor Glover, and Shanna Walker, and Suichi Noguchi of the Japan Aerospace Exploration Agency, or JAXA, were chosen to support this mission.
And bleeding
Again, it's called
M1Ds and
Crew 1.
now.
But today, Doug Hurley is the spacecraft commander for this mission. He previously flew on 2 space shuttle missions as the pilot on STS-127 and STS-135, which was the final space shuttle flight. Here's a closer look at Doug Hurley.
Excited?
Very excited. Yeah, very excited.
You feel ready? Still pumped?
Oh yeah, I think we're ready. I think we're certainly ready.
Joining the SpaceX Demo 2 test. He is a Marine Corps colonel and test pilot. He was selected as an astronaut in 2000. He piloted Space Shuttle Endeavour and Atlantis for STS-135, the final space shuttle mission. Introducing NASA astronaut Doug Hurley.
It's a life-changing process in so many ways to fly into space. It's just overwhelming in some respects. Just the sensations, the rumbling, the shaking, the acceleration. My name is Doug Hurley, and I'm the spacecraft commander for the Demo 2 mission to the International Space Station. This will be the first time the Dragon had a crew on board, and so there's a myriad of objectives we want to achieve for this mission. What would work on orbit, what might not work on orbit, what would definitely work. To be able to just have the entire integrated team that's going to support us getting to and from space station, it was really neat being part of it. You know, we are the lucky ones that get to fly it, but we certainly not for 1 second take for granted the amount of effort that so many other people had to put into this to make it successful.
For Doug personally, he's worked so hard, I mean, through his entire life, to get to where we are right now. As a test pilot, this would be the dream to fly a new vehicle. So it makes me so happy to see that he gets to be part of this mission, the spacecraft commander. I'm just glad to see his hard work and his dream come true for that.
It's been a long road in a lot of ways for not only us, but certainly for all the folks that work in the commercial crew program, as well as SpaceX in our case, just working to get to this point.
We're a little over 1 hour, 3.5 minutes away from launch. Now let's learn a little bit more about the man sitting next to Doug Hurley inside Dragon, NASA astronaut Bob Behnken.
My career at NASA has kind of spanned a couple of decades at this point. I arrived with the class of 2000 Went through the training program, primarily focused on the space shuttle and the International Space Station, learning those systems. Having launched a couple times on vehicles, you know, the second time was definitely different than the first time. You can feel a little bit guilty of, hey, should I study one more thing, or is there one more piece of information I should get? Am I really prepared or not? So that's definitely different between where I was on my first flight and where I'm at right now.
For me personally, as a spouse, watching everything that Bob has put into this over the last 5 years, the dedication that he's shown, the perseverance is pretty special. For both of us, though, the way our minds work, it won't be until sort of the mission is complete that you have really a chance to savor it and celebrate it. This is a huge accomplishment for an Air Force flight test engineer to be part of the demonstration mission of a brand new vehicle. It's going to be amazing.
Without a partner that has that same appreciation, I think it can be challenging for some folks. There's a lot of work and a lot of time that takes away from family that you know, that my spouse appreciates, and I love her for that. On a deeply personal level, I'm really excited that my son is going to get a chance to see me launch into space. Being an astronaut has been a little bit of an abstraction thing for him because he's seen me do it in old videos, but he hasn't seen me do it for real. And so I'm excited for him to see this launch. Really, my role on the Demo 2 mission is to make sure that we get this vehicle tested and evaluated so that we can move on to more operational missions at the International Space Station. We've got a lot of objectives on board the vehicle that we need to accomplish to really make sure that it's good to go. We'll make sure all those systems are working during the test flight so that the future missions will have them available even if they don't plan to utilize them. Through years of the NASA team, helping to share that experience and teaching them the lessons that we've learned by going through this. Now there's another capability in the U.S. besides NASA to operate something of this magnitude. I want to thank the entire Commercial Crew Program team that's worked together to get to this point where we've got vehicles in the launch pad ready to head to the International Space Station.
If we look even further into the not-so-distant future, flying on a mission to space will be an option for more people as SpaceX plans to also fly private astronauts on board Dragon. Earlier this year, SpaceX signed an agreement with the space tourism company Space Adventures to fly up to 4 passengers on an orbital trip aboard Dragon as early as next year. And of course, it's NASA that is making private astronaut missions to the space station a possibility. We are looking forward to these missions, and we hope that you guys are all too.
All right, we are just 20 seconds away from T-minus 1 hour. This is going to be a really big moment that everyone's going to want to listen to. We're expecting a weather update, obviously hoping that the weather is improving, and so we should find out in the next 10 seconds or so. So we're going to stand by for a moment and wait for the Corps to give Bob and Doug a call, and then we'll all hear the latest.
Dragon, SpaceX, we're at T-minus 1 hour.
Toss it over to Jesse.
We are T-minus 15 minutes and 45 seconds from liftoff of our second demonstration mission today, and we have the honor of having SpaceX's president and COO, Gwen Shotwell, join us. Thanks, Gwen, for coming out and taking a few minutes to chat with us.
Thanks, Jesse.
We know you've been on console. How's the countdown been going so far in there?
Countdown is clean today, just like it was Wednesday. We did clear the weather hurdles sooner than we did on Wednesday. And the only thing we're watching right now is downrange weather and lightning at the staging location.
Of course.
But we will clear that hurdle at T-minus 7 minutes.
Awesome. Great. Very exciting. Now I'm going to throw it back to 2012 because you were on console for Dragon when it was first making its way to the space station. How does that experience compare to today?
Stage 2 locks is on the DPUs
So I was nervous
anomaly.
then. I stopped getting nervous for launches. Today I'm nervous again. Super nervous. Stomach and throat.
Understandable.
No, it's a fantastic day today. I'm really excited. The team is pulled together. It's such a professional operation. And when I say team, by the way, I mean SpaceX and NASA. These folks have been working incredibly hard and have done a fantastic job.
Yes, and we are all so excited. And we know that you have to get back inside of Mission Control, but is there anything that you wanted to say before liftoff to NASA and SpaceX?
Well, I want to thank NASA, of course, for their generosity and their help with getting to this place. I want to thank all the SpaceXers who have come together to make this moment in history. And I want to thank Elon for hiring me.
We thank Elon for hiring you as well. Thank you so much for joining us. We'll let you get back to mission control. And good luck with launch today.
Thanks, Jesse. And Godspeed, Bob and Doug.
Well, we are so excited. We are just a few minutes away from countdown. So we are going to turn it over to Dan and John for the final minutes in terminal count. Take it away, John.
T-minus 13 minutes, 30 seconds, continuing to count down. We're continuing to load fuel onto the first stage. That should finish up in just about 6 minutes. Fuel is completely loaded on the second stage. That's closed out. And we are continuing to load liquid oxygen on both the first and second stage. The liquid oxygen load beginning on the second stage just about 3.5 minutes ago. We are also loading cryogenic helium into the storage vessels on the first and second stage, getting in the last little bits of helium when we keep it cryogenic, cold and liquefied. That gets us, just like we do with liquid oxygen, the maximum amount into the storage volume so that we can get the most performance out of the vehicle. Right now, we are in a fairly quiet state on the vehicle. Ground pumps continuing to put the propellant in to first and second stages. Next significant issue callouts that we're going to hear will probably be inside the T-minus 10 minutes when they talk to the crew. We'll listen for that. But at the moment, everything continuing to look good at T-minus 12 minutes and 20 seconds.
We're getting real close now, John. It's only a little over 12 minutes away. Just a reminder for everybody, it's about a 9-minute ride uphill. We'll have some dueling boxes going on as that first stage is going to be coming home while the second stage is carrying Bob and Doug into orbit. But obviously, we'll be keeping an eye on our astronauts the whole way uphill. Some of the calls that you'll be hearing, as there will be what we call performance calls over the Dragon to ground the entire way uphill. And you'll just hear some of the SpaceX engineers calling out trajectories and booster performance. So we're always looking for that word nominal. I know that's one of John's favorite words. That's one of mine too. We want to hear nominal as much as possible up on the way uphill. You might also hear some number and letter combinations, and those correspond to the different abort zones that Bob and Doug are in during their flight uphill. There's 1A and 1B, which signify that they're on the first stage. Those carry them from there in the Cape all the way up to about the very top of North Carolina. And then we'll have 2A through 2E or 2 Echo, and that will be on the second stage, and that goes from North Carolina all the way up to about the tip of Newfoundland, so in the northern Atlantic. And then there is a zone of the northern Atlantic that we're going to avoid, and so you should hear the call out be something similar to forward to Shannon, and that just refers to Shannon, Ireland, which they'll be going off the coast of Ireland at the later stages of the second stage if they have to abort. So just prepping you now for some of those calls. You're hopefully going to hear that word nominal a whole lot on the way uphill. 10.5 minutes. Things are pretty quiet. As John I said, it'll pick up right at about 10 minutes. We'll wait for the crew just to confirm that their displays are in order. The crew is already strapped in and reported that they are go for launch. And we'll continue to watch the fuel gauges tick up on the Falcon 9 vehicle until fueling cuts off at just about 2 minutes prior to launch.
Dragon is in countdown. FTS is armed for launch.
Under a minute now, the FTS, the flight termination system, has been armed.
Dragon, SpaceX, go for launch.
SpaceX Dragon, we're go for launch. Let's light this candle.
T-minus 30 seconds.
Stage 1 tanks pressing for flight.
T-minus 15 seconds. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. Ignition. Liftoff of the Falcon 9 and Crew Dragon. Go NASA, go SpaceX, Godspeed, Bob and Doug.
America has launched. And so rises a new era of American spaceflight, and with it the ambitions of a new generation continuing the dream. 20 seconds into flight, stage 1 propulsion is nominal.
T plus 30 seconds into this historic mission. Flying crew on board Dragon and Falcon 9, and look at them go.
Falcon power telemetry nominal.
M1D throttle down.
We're throttling down to get ready for the period of maximum dynamic pressure. We're in the throttle bucket. Reports say all systems are go.
Vehicle is supersonic.
We've exceeded Mach 1 on the Falcon 9.
M1D throttle up.
We're throttling back up to full power as we're through max Q.
Copy, 1 Bravo.
And we heard that 1 Bravo call out. That's just the second abort zone that they're in. They'll continue to be on this until the first stage has done its job and they switch over to the second. At this point, Bob and Doug pulling about 2.3 Gs, 2.3 times the Earth's gravity, already moving at over 1,500 miles per hour.
We've heard the call out for MVAC engine chill. That's getting the MVAC engine ready to light. That'll come at about 2:44 into flight. Right now, everything continuing to look good. Next major event coming up is going to be the triple. We'll have main engine cutoff of the 9 first stage engines, stage separation, and then ignition of the second stage engine to continue to carry astronauts into orbit. Coming up in about 20 seconds.
M1D throttle down.
We heard we're throttling down the Merlin engines on the first stage. And we have Miko.
Miko.
2 Alpha.
Falcon stage separation confirmed.
Copy, 2 Alpha.
MVAC ignition.
All right, we have stage separation confirmed. The first stage beginning its flight back. The second stage being powered by that single Merlin 1D vacuum engine has ignited and is now carrying Bob and Doug into orbit. So they're going to continue under the power of this second stage.
Stage 2 propulsion is nominal.
Which will cut off at SECO, or second engine cut off at about 8 minutes and 44 seconds into today's flight. So a little over 5 minutes to go still on this second stage. You heard the call out to Alpha, so they're now in the longest abort zone that carries them all the way from about North Carolina up the eastern seaboard almost to Canada. Things looking good though, getting good call outs, nominal propulsion on that second stage. Bob and Doug continuing to make their way into orbit.
Dragon SpaceX nominal trajectory.
Acquisition of signal in Bermuda.
SpaceX Dragon nominal trajectory.
All right, hearing nominal trajectory, so Dragon pointed in the right direction, continuing to make their flight uphill. Heard acquisition of signal Bermuda. That's one of the other ground stations that they're using to get telemetry and data back from this spacecraft.
Stage 2 propulsion is still nominal.
Little over 4 minutes, 40 seconds into the flight. Bob and Doug flying at more than 5,600 miles
Dragon
per hour.
SpaceX nominal trajectory.
Already almost 200 miles downrange from the Kennedy Space Center. Nominal trajectory continuing. And while they continue uphill, looks like we are getting a view of the first stage as well.
Yep, on your right screen, you can see that first stage with the grid fins deployed. It's making its way back to attempt to land on our drone ship, Of Course I Still Love You today. And we're just about a couple minutes away from the entry burn, and that's where 3 of the 9 Merlin engines do ignite to help slow the vehicle down as it re-enters back into the Earth's atmosphere. And then after the entry burn will be the landing burn, which is just a single engine
Dragon SpaceX nominal trajectory.
And you heard
starting chill for entry burn.
There's that call out. They are still on a nominal trajectory on Dragon, still on second stage, and that's that MVAC engine on second stage on your left screen. Again, on your right screen is that first stage booster coming back towards our drone ship, Of Course I Still Love You. We're about a minute away from entry burn.